Story here involves several legal touch points. First, I can tell you the legal news this evening. The judge here in that very controversial case is ruling with the Trump administration that a Columbia University student, Mahmoud Khalil, who was detained last month, can actually now be deported. And this is unusual. It is also how the rule of law works. Sometimes people have strong feelings or disagreement with government actions, but here it is judges overseeing them. They just say that they think it is valid that the administration cited what is an obscure immigration provision that does give the Secretary of State the authority to do individual deportations. Mind you, this wouldn't work on a massive scale because it's case by case, but the Trump administration, through this process, basically has allegations which we are referring to. This has not yet been fully litigated or at all proven in court. The Trump administration is saying this individual led activities that they view as, quote, aligned to Hamas. I can tell you as well that the lawyers on the defense side deny that. And they say there's not much evidence they're aware of that could go anywhere close to that. Now, when you talk about free speech and political activities, we do know this immigrant student was organizing pro-Palestinian protests on campus, which of course is something people are allowed to do in the United States. You can organize protests about all kinds of things peacefully. The ruling comes from the conservative Fifth Circuit, which is based in New Orleans. That's also where the detention centers are held. The Post reports it's also widely considered the nation's most conservative circuit. So there you have what lawyers sometimes call the nexus, the jurisdiction where the thing being challenged is occurring in a place, and that's the place where the judges are ruling. You will also notice, there's been a lot of reporting on this, allegations that the administration has tried to distort, or what lawyers call forum shop, that process by putting people in places where they think they can have more friendly judges to the Trump administration. Now, Khalil's lawyers emphasize that he is, under current status, a legal permanent resident. In other words, their argument against this is that he is allowed to be here, and the government has not yet met the burden, they argue, of proving why that permanent resident status should be destroyed. And if there is a link to terrorism, which of course is a big deal, and many people would say if you can actually prove that in court, not about protest or speech, but you actually have evidence that someone's a member of a foreign terrorist group, well, much of this controversy would then dissipate. That certainly has not yet been proven. It's been asserted. Now, this comes amidst the escalation in the legal battles over Abrego Garcia, which was a big breaking story if you happen to be watching the news late last night. And this hour, going into the end of our 6 p.m. hour on the East Coast, we got a Supreme Court decision on that. Now, he's the father who was living in Maryland, and the Supreme Court ruled against the Trump administration. There's no doubt that he was mistakenly deported to El Salvador. That is to say, the country he was sent to was not where he was allowed to go under U.S. law. I'm simplifying. We can get into all the details. But bottom line, he wasn't supposed to go there. The judges said that. The Trump administration admitted that part was an error. We got this ruling last night where the Supreme Court unanimously ordered the Trump administration to facilitate his release, to get him back to the U.S. or out of El Salvador. A district judge is pursuing this case with requested daily updates from the Trump administration on the steps they're taking to do this. And that touches on a point we actually discussed when we were covering this breaking story last night. The court saying you got to do it to the extent possible is different than a government actually doing everything possible to enact it. So the district judge is saying, hey, you better comply. The Trump administration allegedly defying the earlier order about detailed information on Garcia's location and how he would be brought back. Indeed, the Trump administration had claimed that the earlier such requests were inconsistent with the Supreme Court directive, and the district judge, again, this is the clash we're seeing, is saying, no, you're misconstruing the Supreme Court's order. Nothing could be further from the truth. And saying it's wholly illegal from the moment it happened that they sent this individual Garcia to the wrong place. Now, there is this photo where people believe this is that individual held by guards in the El Salvador prison. You can see in that flash image some sense of what this individual is going through. And again, we deal in evidence here. Courts deal with all kinds of allegations of misconduct, mistake, abuse. Courts also deal with allegations of violence or murder. But what you see here, remember, is a person that the administration admits shouldn't be where he is, treated like this in a foreign prison. They don't even contest that. And now, as of last night, the Supreme Court unanimously saying, fix it. Garcia's attorney is saying the Trump administration has already, quote, flouted the prior court orders, and it's another stunning display of both arrogance and cruelty. Now, we have covered this every way we can, and I've told you we will have on all people involved within reason and with fact-checking to understand what's happening. Indeed, we had a Trump DHS veteran on the show recently discuss this very case. And now we have Garcia's lawyer speaking out today on MSNBC. Let's listen to that.
There's no one in this country who actually believes that it's true that the United States of America is powerless over the government of El Salvador, over this particular facility. We put Kristi Noem inside the walls of that prison, and we got her out, right? So why can't we get Kilmar Abrego Garcia out?
Bottom line, the point there is this powerful government, which did this thing recently, made this mistake that they don't even deny, and the Trump administration can obviously quickly fix it. That is the Garcia lawyer's view. And remember, the Supreme Court, which might disagree about many things involving Trump, came down unanimously 9-0 yesterday, or with no dissents is how we put it, because it was an unsigned order, with the Chief Justice writing for the court. But the whole court says you got to fix this. And so the real touch point here that we're going to be watching in the days ahead is whether the administration figures out a way to do that. There's a lot of evidence they have the power to do so. Or they play these sort of games with someone's life, even after admitting they sent him to the wrong place. There's also a probe into the deportations that has revealed other information. CBS journalists at 60 Minutes exposing how most of those deported to El Salvador, according to at least their information, that is to say, public records, have no apparent criminal records. That includes a 31-year-old, Andre Hernandez Romero, who was a makeup artist from Venezuela who sought asylum in the U.S. His attorney says they are concerned that maybe he was targeted for being gay or his political views, but either way, they say there is no public evidence that would link him to the kind of gangs that were being justified as a reason to use the wartime powers if you take the leap to say that we're at war, even though Congress hasn't declared one, and the gangs are making an invasion. Even if you go all the way down that road, which the Supreme Court has not ruled on yet, whether that's even a valid argument, they still say it wouldn't apply to him because, as you see now, him in this prison photo, having his what appears to be his head shaved from Time Magazine, they say he shouldn't be in the prison even if you accepted those other gang invasion arguments. And his lawyer emphasizes no criminal record in the U.S. or his home country of Venezuela.
It's horrifying to see someone who we've met and know as a sweet, funny artist in the most horrible conditions I could imagine.
You fear for Andre's safety in there.
Absolutely. We have grave concerns about whether he can survive.
This is the reality for those individuals. California Governor Newsom sending a letter to Trump this week asking them to fix these things, to bring these people back. So when you take this all together tonight, in a week where we have seen all kinds of mistakes, reversals, and incompetence by the Trump administration on matters that clearly affect tens or hundreds of millions of Americans' lives in the markets, and you see that level of mistake or incompetence, or worse, as some have argued, you get an idea about what this governing is like. Then you take folks like this, who are literally quite disappeared, so harder for people to learn about them. Not a week where everyone was in the country thinking about all these other immigration issues with the problems, the self-induced market problems. But you take it all together, and what you have is something that is either deeply and stubbornly incompetent when you admit you send the wrong person to a foreign prison and don't just try to fix it immediately, or worse, a type of cruelty, which we have seen alleged in other Trump administration activities. Now, I'm not saying it's one or the other to be sort of vague. Incompetence and mistakes are a big part of how this administration has been running in these first 75 or so days. That's not a secret. So some of it might be incompetence, just like we've seen in other areas. The cruelty, though, targeting certain types of immigrants associated with certain views, slapping the label gang on everyone as a legal and political activity, it would seem, to try to diminish them, to try to say they don't get human rights. This is a big part of what's happening amidst all these other things that are, quote, flooding the zone, as the Trump folks sometimes say, and it's very important, and it affects all of us. And as I've told you, and we had a historian last night on the show reminding everyone, if you think that they start with this weak group and it stops there, history shows when human rights are sacrificed for some, that then is spread to wider and wider groups. It's all about the rule of law fundamentally. And by the way, we had an election with many issues, including inflation, that hurt the Democrats, according to a lot of evidence. But the Democrats also did campaign a lot on rule of law. Maybe they didn't explain it well enough. Maybe people were distracted by other issues. But we are seeing tonight how rule of law is not some abstract concept. Then you look on the home front, where executive powers are also being abused to target American citizens, lawyers who represent all kinds of individuals, universities where so many people send their children to learn to grow up and don't expect it to become a completely government-run, big government, anti-libertarian, political correct screening, which is part of what we're seeing from the sort of right-wing PC police, and attacks on public officials tonight. There's an interim U.S. attorney, a prosecutor, who is Trump's former personal lawyer, very politically, personally, legally loyal to him, Alina Habba, and listen to what she said on Fox News about potentially abusing police and investigative powers against elected Democrats.
I am unfortunately going to announce on your show tonight, Sean, and I want it to be a warning for everybody, that I have instructed my office today to open an investigation into Governor Murphy, to open an investigation into Attorney General Platkin.
The Immigrant Trust Directive is settled law. It's been upheld by judges appointed by President Trump. I don't typically launch investigations on cable news networks. I'm focused on doing my job, which is to keep the residents of our state safe. The interim U.S. attorney, she hasn't been there that long. She said publicly she wants to politicize the office. I hope she starts doing her job.
There you have the Trump prosecutor, who actually has a lot of these powers, and the state's top attorney general responding to this idea that he and other Democratic officials should be investigated based on policy differences over immigration. It's happening. Remember when people said, well, if he gets into office, will there be retribution cases? Here's a big one.